afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that hopefully help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid with my co-host, Dave Burstein. What's up, Dave?
Yep. Well, I just spent an hour and 20 minutes on the phone with Verizon, who was overcharging a friend of mine. And it is really hard to get Verizon to do what they say on their website they will do,
Wow.
and what their press person confirmed to me they will do,
An
and what the
hour and
FCC.
20 minutes, Dave?
Well, that was after 2 hours on Friday.
Whoa.
But we'll tell that story later. Let's get
Okay.
to what's going on in the news.
Okay, well, I think we got some follow-ups from last week. CrowdStrike came out and said that they are 97% back up. To me, that is not a very impressive number, Dave. I mean, it's been 10 days. And
Well, this was
3%
only
of how many
7
people,
days.
how many people were out? How many millions?
Yeah, this was only 7 days after they went out. It's been 3 days since I got this story, and 3% of many million still were unable to get back up because Microsoft and CrowdStrike trying to block viruses and didn't check the programs,
Mm-hmm.
put them out to millions of people, brought down TV stations around the world,
Wow.
and a whole lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that this kind of thing should have been avoided?
Absolutely should have. I mean, I would think, I heard a bunch of different ways that it could have been avoided. The first one being is, not putting out a global update like that to an entire universe of tens of millions of people with one keystroke. I've read that other operators stage and phase the update releases. So they're not hitting everybody at the same time. So if there's a problem, they see it and they have a chance to catch it. So that's just one way that they could have avoided it.
Yeah. Since we started this show, we've been pointing out where a lot of these problems happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been on the air like 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah.
And I found it before. For at least the last 10 years, nearly every phone company I know in the world, including Telefonica in Spain, Verizon and AT&T, and so on, have been laying off people because they haven't needed so many people because the phone lines are not being used anymore, and the equipment is much more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been laying off a lot of people whose primary job was to do things like make sure the system was reliable.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't bring in, they were non-revenue generating employees, which is the way they're described in the field. In other words, Verizon could fire them. Nobody would notice until the entire system went down.
Mm-hmm. Right. And no impact on their bottom line, on their revenues.
Until the entire system.
The disaster hits.
Now, the same thing happened 2 weeks ago, or a similar thing at AT&T.
I saw that, Dave. They had a huge outage. What? How many millions of people got affected? Some 20 million people. Is that right?
Yeah, most of them were down for 18
no, I'm sorry.
hours.
92 million calls were affected, including 25,000 attempted calls to 911. That's a huge number. 92 million? Kidding me? And they were doing an update as well, right, Dave? Was that the cause?
I don't know what the cause was, but underlying them is that it used to be the phone companies were very reliable. They cut back, keep Wall Street happy, and sometimes they get caught like this.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at the story, David. It says AT&T failed to test, back to your point, a disastrous update that kicked all devices off the network. So, It was an update. I don't know if it was one similar to the CrowdStrike, but it was an update that knocked out 92 million calls. And not only was AT&T affected, Dave, but also other carriers that ride on their network, what they call mobile virtual network operators. For instance, like Boost Mobile and others. I think Virgin may ride on AT&T as well. There are a number that ride on the AT&T network that were affected by this nationwide outage. They said hit all 50 states, including DC, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now that's a big impact. That's a big oops.
Now, there's nothing most of us can do about it. It saves the phone companies, which I've written about for 20 years, billions of dollars getting rid of the checks and balances and the people who are supposed to keep the system resilient. So it goes. Now, let me take that to another one. Another outage, 600 apartment buildings in Ukraine lost their heat because somebody managed to get frosty goop malware into their computer systems.
What kind of malware, Dave?
It's called frosty goop.
Oh my goodness, these names.
Yeah, well, it gets very boring chasing down all the things. There's so many viruses and so on. You've got to sometimes have a joke.
So this virus got into the heating system, control system in an apartment complex in Ukraine?
Only 600 of them, according to the newspaper. And to a certain extent, this probably was the people who should have been at Microsoft to protect their system from things like this happening aren't at Microsoft anymore because they wanted to cut those salaries. I don't know that that is in fact was related to this, but I know that is a very common thing across technology. Now, much more frightening, a story that we've been following for 3 years and now is hitting the headlines in the New York Times. The headline in the New York Times is "Killer Robots Are Here." It wasn't like Terminator, where the robot looked like a person, a humanoid, or Blade Runner. The robots actually flew and were drones modified to carry 2 pounds of explosives, enough to kill a pile of people, as 12 people were killed on a soccer field in Israel, was something that probably was similar.
What's the New York Times story say? Is this the U.S. military that's using this, Dave, or who's deploying it?
We don't know whether or not the U.S. military is using it. We don't know for a fact that the Israeli military is using it, but there's lots of reasons to believe that, reported by the Israeli Hebrew newspapers. And the New York Times had bodies on the ground in Ukraine, one of whom went to the front lines, seeing what was happening with the drones. Now, the difference between the drones that we're talking about as killer robots and the ordinary drones that are being used by the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in the wars in Ukraine and in Palestine is that these decided, presumably, on their own, who to kill and whether or not.
Wait, Dave. You're saying that these drones are making their own decisions as to where to go and where to drop their explosives and not being driven or guided by human beings?
The New York Times is very careful because what we're talking about is obviously military secrets. And most of the nations and the Secretary General of the United Nations has condemned this. The United States says we don't and we won't do it unless there's a human approval. The official word in Israel is that they always have a human approved the mission, including bombing missions, of which there are many. But the Israeli newspapers found out that they had to do one decision every 20 seconds about whether to drop a bomb on a house with people in it. Now, I know the technology that was being used in the Ukraine drones, and I would be amazed if the Ukrainians were not actively using it. They are losing a war. There have been tens of thousands of people who were killed. They are in a pretty desperate situation now. The Western powers are not even able to supply them with the artillery shells they need because they could not be manufactured despite the US, German, French, and I think British factories going as fast as they could, because today's artillery pieces can go boom, 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 and get an enormous number of shells.
So, David, is this your surmise or the New York Times surmise that most of these drones are coming from the Ukrainian side?
Both sides are using drones. The Ukrainians are getting any kind of drone they can. Military drones from Turkey, and literally going into hobby stores, buying consumer drones, which can be directed by the person on the other side, and attaching to them bombs. And these have been very lethal. Although artillery show, it turned out, according to, I think it was the Times, that while the drones are dramatic, ordinary old artillery shows, just like the ones in World War II, are causing 80% of the casualties on each side. The Russian casualties are on the order of 100,000. The Russians had a lot of their own drones. They've been getting them from Iran, and I believe also from North Korea. Putin made a trip over to North Korea to arrange this kind of military assistance.
Now, Dave, you led off the story saying that these are robotics, so it's another evolution above the regular drone where there's some sort of, I guess, AI intelligence where the drones are making decisions about go, no go, bomb, don't bomb. What I'm gonna do do we have any insight into how that works?
Well, the New York Times reporter, who is dealing obviously with military secrets, was very careful in what he wrote. I know, and he knows, that it is now ordinary technology for the drones that are being built and used to be able to, well, he described it. The Ukrainians are making a lot of their own drones. And he went into the field with the president, the CEO of a Ukrainian drone maker. And what the president directed his drone to do was say, follow me. And the drone had enough intelligence to follow him. And if the instructions were drop that bomb, he would have been dead, the New York Times pointed out. So the New York Times did not say that the Ukrainians, when they got a drone behind the Russian lines, let the drone kill whoever they could find. But that's the great fear. And that's why the New York Times put the headline on it, and the reporter used it in the story, killer robots are here.
Well, so it sounds like the drones are or could be on the verge of, if not already, turning into hunters, where they go out and looking for targets that maybe they have been pre-programmed to look for. and going after them, and then when they find them, making a decision to strike. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Well, what I know for sure, and what the New York Times reporter knew for sure, is that the drones being produced today can do that.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have any evidence that that's what the Ukrainians were doing. So the killer drones are here. It is a military secret whether or not they're
Yeah.
being used by the Ukrainians.
We don't know who or where they're
But
being deployed.
given how that the Ukrainian war is by far the biggest war in Europe since 1945.
Mm.
And I suspect that the Ukrainians and probably the Russians, although we haven't got any evidence on that, are doing whatever they can to win that war.
Mm-hmm.
But again, let me be very clear. I know that the drones who can do this are being produced because, among other things, drone makers demonstrate how well they can do this to trade shows and at conferences.
Wow.
We do not know for sure that the Ukrainians are using it that way, but the killer robots are here. There's nothing you can do about it. The United States alone is spending $5 billion, excuse me, on artificial intelligence to do things like this. And it absolutely is within. Now, have you ever tried to use ChatGPT and discovered it makes a lot of mistakes that we call the hallucinations?
I haven't had any personal experience with that, Dave, but I've read a lot of anecdotal stories about mistakes, hallucinations, and just gumming up the works.
Well, I've had many because I'm on the AI stuff often. I am not a documentary filmmaker in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
There's apparently somebody with a similar name to mine, and that's why they got it wrong. It definitely did not cost. This would be This would be a Llama from Meta, the old Facebook. $1.3 billion to train one of their smaller models, which I was just told 2 days ago by Llama itself that I asked how much it cost. And they came up with a number that said the industry standard figure is that it costs so and so many dollars per parameter, size of the model, and that this model was big enough, it would have cost $1.3 billion. In fact, there is no reason to believe that any model on Earth has cost more than $150 million.
Oh, get out of here, David. So where they come up with these numbers? What is it? They had in the book? Well, what's going on?
Well, this happens a lot, and it's a huge problem. It's why AI is not being used in many medical applications where it would work and does work and is proven to work quite well, because the AIs we have now make a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to, next week, I can explain why it happens and why it's so hard to fix. But the thing to take away is to know AIs make a lot of mistakes.
Okay. Granted that, but why this disparity in the numbers that you just cited, Dave, in terms of
let me take a guess.
What it costs to to create these language models?
Let me take a guess. How does the language model, in this case, Llama 3, which is a very excellent and interesting model. The bigger versions of Llama 3 is as good as anything on Earth, including ChatGPT 4.0. How do they give you the answers? Well, you make the model by taking enormous amounts of data. One of them I just saw worked on 15 trillion pieces of data. They read them into the model, and the model, using some fancy math, finds what's related to what and what connects to what. And it works incredibly well, as we've all heard and known and seen by the remarkable things that the language models and the image models and now the video models are doing. How does it do it? Well, we never know for sure. Actually, there is no way to figure out why Llama got that one wrong, because when you have a model based on 15 trillion, I think Llama only used 8 trillion data points, which were run through a whole pile of math, $150 million worth of computer time on the most advanced computers anywhere. There's no human being who can figure out what's going on. And that's a problem that's very well known. And there's thousands of people around the world working on how do we see what's actually going on inside to make them more reliable. But the kind of thing that could happen is that Llama went looking for, I put in a prompt, what does it cost to run this model, and came up with the best answer it could. And the answer was based on maybe an article in a technical journal, maybe a Reddit comment from an unknown ordinary folk that said it cost so and so much per parameter, and we knew it was 13 billion parameters. So that would have been what? That would have been 10 cents a parameter, and took that number and multiplied it and came up with the best answer it could, which is how it does things. But the best answer is not always right. And as I say, there are thousands of people around the world working on improving it. The rate has probably gone down by half, but I still, as I say, I happen to be working on a story that had the cost of the biggest models out there. And one of the models was Llama 3, a larger version, Llama 3 540B instead of 13B. And the folks at Meta, made Llama, said that it took 30 million hours of computer time. They had 16,000 processors, not 16,000, but 16,000 chips, each of which have hundreds of processors possibly, running for 30,000 hours. And since you can buy this computer time, I was able to look at the prices from a couple of data centers that would let you have H100s, which is what they use here, like Llama used, and it worked out to about $5 an hour. So since Meta presumably is very big and has among the lowest costs, saying that they cost them $5 an hour by 30 million hours comes to 150 million. And I've seen numbers, for example, for ChatGPT that were lower than that from a source that I believe knows what the numbers are. It was an important publication from Stanford, and the Stanford folks work very closely with the ChatGPT folks. So that's the takeaway, that AI makes mistakes, and letting it make the decision on who to kill, well, You
Pretty
can make up
scary,
your
Dave.
own mind about that.
Pretty scary. Okay, we're
Yeah.
getting close to our break time, Dave. When we come back, I want to talk about some other uses of GPT. I know one of the things that we've talked about before, and I think a story just came out again, updating Search GPT and how that works and how that's kind of transformative in terms of what we think of as search.
It is highly unlikely that what you might have read in the newspapers and the technical press, that it is going to wipe out Google's search. But we'll talk about that after the break.
Okay, great. Okay, you're listening to Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break.
Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, don't you know, my darling? I said it right now, and the cotton is high. Like a your daddy is a rich, kind of rich girl, and your mommy's good looking, yeah. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings come, girl. You're gonna rise up singing. Then you spread your little wings, and take to the sky. La, 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 la. That morning come, baby. There's nothing gonna harm you, girl. With the mommy and a daddy standing by. Yeah. I know, my little darling, I love you so, and I'm never gonna let you go, love. La 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 la, 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 la la la. Yeah, pretty people tell us yeah, yeah, yeah. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Hey, shut, don't you cry, daughter. Little darling, I said now, no, oh, John, I said it right now. Listen, baby, I don't want you to die, daughter. Pretty baby, child, don't let a tear fall from your eyes. Hey, all I'm gonna do to be you. Baby, child, I said it right now. Don't let a tear, don't let a tear, don't let a tear. Baby, child, I said fall out from your eyes. So hush, pretty baby, don't not let a tear fall from your eye. Oh!
Okay, we're back. Community Technology, Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Dave, before the break, I had mentioned that there's a relatively new search out there that's powered by AI, something called a Search GPT. And if I'm not mistaken, OpenAI is the company behind it. It sounds like, as I read about it, Dave, that it's kind of a different way to look at search, different from your typical Google, which just gives you, I guess, associations and connections, and that this new search actually answers questions, and then you can go back and do follow-up questions based on how you searched. Have you used it? What's your experience with it?
Well, I've used something that's just like it, which comes from Google and is in the ordinary search. What OpenAI did is they let a limited number of people test for a short time their search engine, which is designed to compete directly with Google. You cannot use it. I couldn't use it. And it's not clear anybody ordinary will be able to use it for 6 or 12 months. They're going to see what it takes when they try to get the bugs out. But this was a way to get it tested pretty widely. How this works. We actually talked about this on the air about 2 months ago, I think. And Google is doing the same thing. If I go to Google and I put in, military drones in Ukraine, what answer would you expect to get 6 months ago, Stu?
They probably would have
You
given
get a page through of links on the web.
Yeah, whatever the New York Times and the media had been reporting, it'll give you those stories.
And Google's actually done, only in the last couple of months, a good job of getting rid of most of the junk.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gotten much better. But if I say military drones in Ukraine now into Google, on most searches, it would take the phrase military drones in Ukraine, do some tricks with it, and pop it over to Google's great big language model called Gemini, which is very good. And at the top of the side of my screen, I would see a couple of paragraphs about military drones in Ukraine before I got to any of the links.
Okay.
And it's working quite well. Big percentage
so it kind of gives you
time.
some background, gives you a thumbnail about what you queried before you even go to the links. I guess maybe that'll help you figure out what links might be useful to you.
And I would guess that about half the time, the answer I need, because I'm always looking up facts on the search engines, is right there on top of the screen, and I don't have to look at any of the links. And it's much faster and it's great. They did that because they knew that OpenAI with ChatGPT was going to work something like that to use their model. And I believe there are 2 or 3 others that are coming like that. So
Doesn't OpenAI, isn't that Search GPT, don't they have a beta that folks can go on and check out?
No.
Oh, they don't.
On this, they gave it to a limited number of people. It wasn't an open beta.
I see.
If as a reporter I'd sent a note over to the press person, they probably would have let me into it. But they let a lot of reporters into it, which is why we know so much about it.
But now is the Google AI search engine operative?
You just go to google.com and try it. So let me give you a data point for the next story. According to a respected international organization called Copernicus, the 2 hottest days in recorded history, which goes back to about 1840, happened in the last 2 weeks.
Oh.
Why don't you take that away and talk about the climate thing? Because I'm going to go test the Google that we were just talking about while you talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's been so much talk about climate change and what's happening as a result of all the carbon emissions coming from industry, coming from cars and vehicles, and so much of the corporate world has been trying to deny it, trying to suppress it, trying to say that these are just anomalies. Meanwhile, we're getting melting on the polar caps in Antarctica, and so much warm water is being released into the ocean, and there's a whole ecosystem that is really kind of moving out of balance, and I'm not sure that the scientists fully understand it. There's a lot of hypotheses out there, but the bottom line results can't be denied. And even though it's only been, about 150, 160 years, Dave, according to what you just said, that we have been recording temperatures, there has been a noticeable trend up globally of temperatures, and certainly we've seen it right here in our region. These are some of
you mean we don't have white Christmases in New York anymore?
I remember one about
no
5 years ago.
year.
But when we were kids growing up, it happened all the time. We had lots of snow in the wintertime.
20 inches twice when I was in fourth grade, and it was wonderful. I didn't have to go to school.
Yeah. I grew up in Ohio and Cleveland, so we had snow all the time. In fact, most winters, it would snow in November, December, and Dave, the snow would stay on the ground until the spring. It never warmed up enough to melt. You would have more snow coming down and it would just kind of renew it. And I remember one winter, the school system decided, okay, we're not going to close the schools. No matter what, the schools are going to be open. They just made a rule. We're not closing. No matter what, the schools are open. I mean, that's how much snow we had. But this is back in the 50s and 60s. So, you're looking at fast forward to 60, 70 years later, and we got nothing like that anymore. And I'm sure New York is not Cleveland, but I know, talking to my friends who grew up here in New York City, there was a lot more snow back in the days. I'm talking about
every year. The 60s. Every year you had one or two big snowstorms, and usually several smaller ones. And I miss it. I happen to like the snow. Although a lot of people, Maria, who's in the next room right now working on something, grew up in West Africa. And she hates the snow because there's no snow where she grew up. So she's very happy that it's not gone.
Yeah, I remember when I was in London once working on a video project. It's going back a couple of decades. And my partners were from Jamaica. And they had not seen snow, but they had to come in the middle of December to London to help with this post-production that we were doing. And the young brother, he came and he had just like a light summer jacket, Dave, and he was like so befuddled and bemused by the weather. He didn't know what to do. And he had never seen snow. And this guy was probably 30-something years old. He'd never seen snow in his life. So,
but how did they have a bobsled team?
Yeah.
You remember the Jamaican bobsled team?
Yeah, I remember the movie Cool Runnings. I don't know how much of that was real, but I certainly remember
it was real.
Cool Runnings. Yeah.
A couple of people from Jamaica created a bobsled team, went to Colorado somewhere where they actually had bobsled trucks because they had real snow, rained, and wound up going to the Olympics. Wow. As I recall, they finished dead last, but there was a Jamaican bobsled.
They were in it, yeah.
Yeah. Let me give you a couple of pieces on climate that have been coming across my desk lately. First, what we said in this item was not that we are 100% convinced that climate change is real. I happen to be 99% convinced, as are most climate scientists, but you should make your own judgment. What we do know is that We had the hottest days on record, and you can draw whatever inference.
Now, Dave, when you say hottest days on record, where are we measuring? Is it just the U.S. or
Around the world.
Average global temperature? Global.
Global.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's
so by what kind of margins are we talking about? Say hottest. I mean, is it way hotter or tiny bit hotter, or what are we talking about?
In most of this, we're talking about 2 and 3 degrees.
Uh-huh.
I don't happen to know this particular one, and it may have only been 1/10 of a degree. Mm-hmm. But let me go to another climate story, 2 of them actually. One is wonderful news. Germany is now 53% renewable energy, even though they turned off some of the nuclear plants.
Wow.
And what's going on there?
Yeah, they're highly industrialized. That's pretty impressive.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all the coal. Germany's industrialization was iron and steel. Mm-hmm. The arms of Krupp, World War I, and so on. Saarland. Germany has proven, which China is proving even more conclusively, that you can generate most of the electricity you need at a plausible cost using solar and wind.
Solar and wind?
Wind.
Mm-hmm.
Solar is, at the moment, solar is much bigger than wind, and that'll probably continue. But those big windmills, including the one off the shore of Cape Cod that fell apart, really work. And you know how big they are? I don't remember the exact number, but it's like the blades on the windmill are like 200 feet.
Whoa, that's monstrous.
They're huge.
Wow.
And they're supposed to put a whole slew of them near Long Island. Mm-hmm. And it may be worth it. It's to get the cheap energy. Now, why is Germany doing so well? The first is the government decided to do it and set requirements, and the energy companies had to go along with it. Mm-hmm. The second is that the cost of solar has come down by something like 70 or 80% in the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. 90% of solar panels come out of China, where there are a couple of several huge $10 billion factories that make solar panels really efficiently. Mm-hmm. They're making more solar panels. One of the Chinese press stories said they could make twice as many as they can sell at this point.
Wow.
So the price came all the way down, and it made it affordable. The U.S., according to a U.S. government report I just saw today, is getting 42% more solar power this year than last year.
Really?
Because we're buying a lot of panels, mostly from China.
More power or more of the technology? More actual power? Or more panels?
I'm almost sure it's power.
Wow.
And one of the things they're doing, there's a problem with solar panels. Sometimes the sun doesn't shine. Mm. And so what's happening is they're putting in huge batteries.
Right.
Some come from Musk and Tesla. Mm. A lot come from Chinese manufacturers. Because battery costs have come all the way down as well. So that they're just this last year, they are putting in things like huge, thousands and thousands of panels in the desert, in Texas, and storage next to it that they load up during the day so that they have it when they need it at night.
But Dave, now isn't the U.S. government trying to put tariffs on the Chinese imports of solar technology? I know you mentioned that a few weeks back. That I don't know if it happened or they're just talking about it. What's the status on that?
No, we're cutting down imports from China. Some by giving huge subsidies to the few American manufacturers that are left.
Mm.
So what China is doing is they have so much capacity, and the raw materials aren't that expensive, that the Germans are buying solar panels so cheaply that people are putting them on their balconies instead of their roofs.
Mm.
You put it on the roof and you get direct sun.
Mm.
Put it on the balcony, you're going to be blocked by the balcony above you, or you're going to be put on an angle, and it doesn't work nearly as well.
Mm. But it does work in indirect light, though, doesn't it, Dave? I mean, I think that's a misconception that you have to be in direct sunlight. Don't the panels also store energy from indirect sunlight?
It does, but
or
not as
convert,
efficiently. But the panels are now so cheap that people in Germany are spending their own money to put them on fences of their garden and balconies. So that is really good news. It is definitely possible to really cut down on the use. Coal is disappearing in most countries, and the US oil has mostly disappeared because gas was cheaper. And they think that there's enough solar power coming in that there's going to be less gas, that in this year or next year is going to be the highest usage of gas to make electricity because there'll be so many solar panels coming in the next few years.
Wait, say that again, Dave. You said the gas consumption is going up or down. You lost me on that.
The gas has been going up, but the people are projecting, and we're talking about a US government agency, that this year or next year will be the highest it will ever get.
Oh, so in other words, it's going to start to decline from here going forward.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Even though we're getting all these computer centers, all these electric cars, not as many as they expected, but there's still a lot getting out. China is making more electric cars than the entire rest of the world combined.
Wow.
Yeah. And in my head, well, how much time do we have?
We got about 5 minutes left, Dave.
Okay, let me give you the last of this and then a quick thing on something I'm going to carry over to next week. We talked about how the new searches, the ChatGPT search, and the way Google itself works is throw the query at the big language models and drop all the links we're used to lower on the page. So while you were talking about climate, I tried one. And I put in there the impact of AI on energy demand. And what did I get? Artificial intelligence can impact energy demand in many ways, including natural gas. AI could increase demand for natural gas as data centers and power companies require more electricity. Google's Gemini just did a better job than the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, because this is one that I researched. It turns out that there is a lot of energy being used for data centers. It is not blowing the system. It is not putting a crunch on. We do not have to build more coal and gas electric plants in Virginia because the data centers need so much energy.
Yeah, that was one of the headlines that I had seen a couple of weeks back, Dave. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but the headlines was kind of trumpeting, the big increase, the big AI as it develops is going to be consuming more and more electricity, and we could have a problem down the road. You're saying that's bunk.
It's something that I can't say on the radio.
Okay.
And I say that having researched it pretty deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you want to bring down all the energy use on everything, but no, it's not needing as much as the crisis. And a lot of the stories have started from the power companies who want to build more plants using gas and coal because they make money on the plant. They got a guaranteed rate of return on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I looked at one of those articles, I looked at where they got it, and it was all power company people.
Wow.
And they, of course, found a couple of academics who said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually looked at the amount of energy being required by the data centers, and I looked at the original studies. But yes, now that is a good job, and I didn't, to find the impact of AI and energy demand, I didn't have to go down to the
you have to click on the links. Mm-hmm.
Where it said AI is poised to drive 160% increase in data center power. That comes from Goldman Sachs. It's dead wrong. They didn't realize that AI chips are getting more efficient, and AI software, the algorithms are getting better, and it's not going to be that big. Okay, one last thing to say. I'm holding it over to next week. Just before the show, and apologies, Stu, I spent an hour and 20 minutes on the phone with Verizon, helping a friend who had been charged $100 on her new service, no, $89, that she shouldn't have paid. In fact, I looked at what was on the Verizon website. I sent some emails to Verizon PR who confirmed I was right. They now have an offer the first 6 months, if you're in their energy program, if you're in their Verizon Forward program, are free to get new accounts in. But they charged her $89. And that's going to be a story I'll bring next week. I did a rough calculation. They also sold her, Stu, very quick question. How often have you noticed you use more than 300 megabits on your home connection?
I've never noticed it.
You might get there if you do massive downloads. And Jenny, who's a professional video person, did sometimes run out on 100 megabits. Verizon, on that phone call, tried to explain to me why my friend that I was helping, Maria, should buy the gigabit service instead of the 300 megabit service at a cost of $500 more a year.
Whoa. Wow.
And I did some rough calculations. I don't know how many people took the gigabit service, but I am guessing that Verizon customers are paying something between $600 million and $1 billion a year for speed they don't use. And Comcast, we said, has more customers, probably even a higher number. So it took me an hour and 20 minutes to finally get the credit. 2 hours I spent Friday researching this and figuring out what was due and so on.
Yeah.
Next week, we will invite Verizon to put their opinion on the air. Least we can do.
Yeah. Good luck with that one, Dave.
There are actually some very good engineers at Verizon.
Okay, maybe
not as many as they used to have.
That would
be. But I respected a number of Verizon engineers.
Okay, let's give it a shot.
I even worked with high-level Verizon engineers who I was on the committee for the 6G wireless standard. And one of the key people in that committee was a brilliant Verizon engineer.
Okay.
Who could have been a professor in the Ivy League if that's what he wanted to do.
Okay. Let's give it a shot. Okay, very good. Okay, this has been Community and Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Tune in, and don't forget, we're on the web too at whcr.org. Every Wednesday, 5 to 6 p.m. You just might learn something. Good night.